Welcome to Sola Church Online.
I'm Alan Rigg. This is my wife, Miranda Landers, and together we lead Sola Church, a hybrid church, digital plus micro.
And if you're wondering what is digital church, well, you are here right now with us having digital church. We put a new service up every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on our Church Online platform.
And then micro church, that's our small groups called life groups that meet during the week. We've got in-person groups and we've got online groups. We'll tell you more about that at the end of the service.
And I think you're going to enjoy the service today. Let's worship.
Give to win my war. Your love becomes my greatest defense. It leads me from the dry wilderness, and all I did was praise. All I did was worship. just bow down. No, I'm just gonna stay still.
This is that time in our service when we worship with our giving. If you're just checking us out today, please don't feel like you have to participate. But if Sola Church is your church home, or these online services have just been a blessing to you, it's super easy to make a one-time tax-deductible donation or even to schedule a recurring gift.
The easiest way is to scan the QR code on your screen. But you can always go to solachurch.life and click the tab at the top that says Give.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys so much for your generosity. Your giving makes it possible for us to create this digital content, to do our micro church gatherings, to do outreach. So thank you guys.
Let's get into our time of teaching.
You know, when we lived in LA, which we lived on the west side of LA in Santa Monica for about 4 years, it seems like every single night when you turned on the news, there was a police chase. I mean, it was unbelievable how frequently the news was completely preempted by live coverage, you know, from a helicopter overhead of one of these chases. And usually they were high-speed chases. Every now and again, there would be a slow-speed chase. But I have to admit, as ridiculous as it was that this happened sometimes on consecutive nights, I found myself glued watching. It reminded me of a story that was in the news some years ago about a slow-speed chase. There was a driver in Shelbyville, Tennessee, that led police on such a chase. Officers were certain that what they had was a DUI on their hands, you know, that they were going to find someone who'd had a few too many and who needed to be arrested for DUI. The person was weaving all over the road and they couldn't stay in their lane. They nearly hit one car that was stopped at a stoplight. And this went on for 7 miles before the truck finally pulled up and came to a stop in front of a house. Police were shocked at what they found when they approached the driver. Inside the truck, behind the wheel of the car, was someone who stood not even 4 feet tall. A second grader was behind the wheel of the truck. The house that he'd stopped in front of was his parents' house. It was where he lived. And police asked him, you know, what in the world he was thinking taking off in his parents' truck. He said that he'd gone to get his driver's license. Yeah. Apparently he couldn't wait till he turned 16. It's hard to wait, isn't it? It's hard for me to wait in life. It's hard for you to wait in life, and especially when God is the one making us wait. Why does he do that anyway? Why doesn't he answer our prayers as soon as we say them? Why does he make us wait for that job or that promotion or that pay raise? Why does he make us wait for that house or that car? Why does he make us wait for a husband or a wife or for children or for grandchildren? Why does he make us wait for our hurts to heal or our bodies? Why does he make us wait to get out of debt or to get out of legal trouble? Like the waiting, the downtime, it doesn't make sense. There's just no upside to it. Or is there? Let's turn in the Bible to Mark chapter 5, the gospel according to San Marcos. Coolest thing ever that we are in a city named after the author of a Bible book. But we've called this series Marked because Jesus is marking us. And not just for us, not just for our own sake, but so that we can leave his mark on our city and on all of North County. And so in this series, as we're learning and growing together, we're becoming unstoppable, unerasable, marked. We're going to call this particular message Marked by Waiting. Waiting teaches us some of the most amazing lessons. One of those is that God is in control. Let's talk about that, how waiting teaches us that God is in control. We're going to begin reading in verse 21. It says, "Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live." So in our story last week, Jesus was on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. He crosses back now to the western shore. He's probably in Capernaum when they have this impromptu gathering in verse 21. Luke tells us that they were waiting for him there. People were waiting for him, which seems appropriate given our topic this morning. But it's at this point in the story that we're introduced to this ruler named Jairus in verse 22. Now, if we could just sort of go back in time for a minute and think about what life in a first century synagogue was like, here's what they would have done. They would have chosen from amongst themselves elders. But then from among that group, they would have chosen a ruling elder. They would call that individual a ruler, like Jairus is, like the reference here. And so it's an interesting thing to think about how Jairus was a VIP in the Jewish community. You know, he is someone that people would have looked up to and had lots and lots of respect for. But more importantly, he was a dad, like I am. He was a girl dad, like me. I have 2 daughters. Luke says that this man had only 1 daughter. Now, I mean, any parent knows, anyone who's raised children knows the highs and the lows of parenting, right? I mean, there are some days with some happy tears, and there are some days with some sad tears, like the whole experience of being a father, of being a mother, is filled with some highs and some lows. And in this situation, we see someone who's experiencing a true low. This was daddy's girl, and she was dying. So in a way was he. Now you notice in verse 23, it says that she was actually at the point of death. I mean, that means that this man, he had to act. He had to act fast. And that's exactly what he did. Now, if in fact this story is taking place in Capernaum, it might be helpful to talk about something that happened before this in Capernaum. There's a story that's recorded in Matthew 8 and in Luke 7 about a centurion's servant who was healed by Jesus in Capernaum. Now, the centurion hadn't gone to Jesus himself. The centurion had sent the elders, of whom Jairus was the ruler, the leader. So he had sent the elders to Jesus. Apparently, he'd made a large contribution. He'd endeared himself to them by making a large contribution to their building fund. Like we're told that he had something to do with the building or the refurbishing of their synagogue. And so, he meant a lot to them. They were really grateful for him, and they were happy to help him and to serve him in this way. So my point is that Jairus would have known all about the healing of the centurion's servant. When these elders came back from having approached Jesus on the centurion's behalf, they would have reported to Jairus what had happened. So he would have been intimately acquainted with Jesus' power to heal and to do something transformative in the most impossible of situations. And so Jairus, he didn't send delegates, he went himself. And it says that he fell at Jesus' feet and he begged him. Verse 23, it says he begged him. How undignified for a man, of this particular station in life. But none of that mattered to Jairus. This speaks to something that we've talked about before. Last year we talked together about how many of us, others at least might say this about us if we wouldn't say it about ourselves, how many of us are controllers or who struggle to try to control everyone or everything around us. And one of the interesting things about when we have these kinds of control issues is that it's never really about the people that we're trying to control or the problems that we're trying to control. It's really about us. It's about a need that we're trying to fill, or it's about a fear that we may have. We're afraid of losing control. The thing is, you can't lose control unless you have control. And the truth is, we don't. He tried to take control of this situation, Jairus did, but he had no control of this situation. The thing about waiting whenever we have to do it is that it reminds us who's in control. When we were living in Santa Monica, we had a hospital. I mean, you live somewhere, eventually you need a hospital, and you settle on one. And so this was our go-to hospital, and we went there a lot. We went to St. John's emergency room when Miranda's mother fell and broke her nose on a visit to Santa Monica. We went back to the St. John's emergency room, when Miranda crushed her hand loading gear and setting up gear for Sola Church. We went back when Des had an injury. I forget the exact nature of that injury now. And we went back again when Miranda broke her toe. You can't unsee a pinky toe that is perpendicular to the toe next to it. You can't unsee that. So, St. John's of Santa Monica, famous because that's the place where my favorite guitar player of all time, Eddie Van Halen, that's where he passed. So that's already hallowed ground for me. But we spent plenty of time there paying our respects to Edward Van Halen. We were there quite frequently at that hospital. But every time we went, you have to wait in the waiting room. The first time we were there, we couldn't even all do that because it was still COVID protocols. So Miranda was allowed to wait in the waiting room with her mother. The rest of us, Miranda's dad and me and Des, we had to wait outdoors, outside. We sat on a bench, where the cars pull up to the emergency room. But every time we've been there, we've had to wait. Who waits in the waiting room? We do. We wait in the waiting room. You know who doesn't wait in the waiting room? The doctor. Why? Because the doctor's in control. I'm not in control. The fact that I'm the one waiting is a reminder that I'm not in control, that someone else is. And so God allows an emergency in our lives. He allows things outside of our control. And we find ourselves in a spiritual ER. We find ourselves in God's waiting room. And when we do, we're reminded that God is in control. The fact that we're waiting is a reminder that we're not in control, that we never were in control, that we never will be in control. You know what else it reminds us? And this is something else that we did talk about last year. But it reminds us that yes, things do get out of control in our lives. I mean, somebody right now is just like, you want to see out of control? Come home with me. I'll show you out of control. We got out of control. Well, yeah, things do get out of control in our lives, but whose? Out of our control. Never out of His. Never, ever out of God's control. So I don't know about you, but I have certainly discovered that trying to control everything is exhausting. The proverbial, spinning of the plates. You spin this one, you spin this one, you spin this one, you come back over here before this one falls. Like living like that is exhausting. And at some point, you're going to have some breakage, right? So that's why we have to trust God. We have to let go of the need to control everything. We have to take our place alongside Jairus at Jesus' feet, like it says in verse 22. Marked by waiting. Waiting teaches us that God is in control. You know what else it teaches us? It teaches us that time is on our side. Yeah, let's pick it up in verse 24. It says, so Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now, a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. And immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. Have you guys ever heard of the field traffic psychology? I didn't even know that was a field until I was reading one time about the field of traffic psychology. And they actually have labeled this phenomenon rushing mania that I'm going to tell you about. Rushing mania. People who have rushing mania, there's two things that are true about them. First of all, they have an extraordinary need to avoid slowing down. And second of all, they have a consequent anger against anyone who causes a slowdown. There was a study done recently by a Michigan firm that showed that almost 80% of drivers are angry most of the time while driving. 80%. I mean, that means that like when you drive to work tomorrow, 4 out of every 5 drivers you pass is somewhere on the road rage scale, the spectrum of road rage. They're on there somewhere, 4 out of 5. Now, surprisingly, this is not something new. Researchers have uncovered accounts of buggy rage. Yeah, and they suspect there was probably chariot rage as well. Verse 24, I imagine we see sandal rage. You know, these guys have got their sandaled feet and they're making their way from point A to point B, but it's taking forever and they're not happy about it. Especially Jairus. Jairus was in a hurry. And you know what he didn't need? He didn't need an interruption. And yet it's right in that moment that, Jesus stops and has a moment with this unnamed woman. Let's talk about her. Let's talk about her diagnosis. Verse 25, it says that she had a flow of blood. We do not know exactly what that means, but it almost certainly means that she was hemorrhaging in some way. She likely had some kind of internal bleeding. And for that reason alone, she likely would have been anemic. So, no doubt this is something that she was really struggling with, something that she was really suffering from. And not only physically, but I want you to understand how much she was struggling socially and spiritually. Having this particular health issue for a Jewish woman would have meant being ceremonially unclean. We would say she couldn't go to church, but she would say that because of this physical condition, because it made her ceremonially unclean, she couldn't go to the temple. She couldn't participate, in temple worship. She wouldn't even be welcome at the synagogue. Like this would be a real, issue for her. And why would that be true? Well, partly because not only was she rendered ceremonially unclean, but anyone she touched would be unclean. Anything she touched would be unclean. Anyone who touched something that she had touched would become unclean. So no one would want to get anywhere near her. I mean, she was likely completely isolated from her community. And her condition carried not just sickness, but shame. Maybe that's why in Matthew's version, remember here in Mark, it talks about what she said about if she could only get close to him and so forth. Well, Matthew makes it clear that when she said that, she was talking to herself. My guess is she didn't have anyone else to talk to. Her life was a lousy life. And it had probably been lousy for a very long time. She had suffered not just for 12 days, not just for 12 weeks, not even for 12 months, but for 12 long years, she had been untouchable. Verse 26 says that she'd suffered many things from many physicians. Well, that sounds unpleasant, doesn't it? In Luke's account, in Luke 8, verse 43, Luke, who was himself a medical doctor, agrees and says more or less the same thing about her experience. Sometimes when we're reading a Bible story, we can throw a little light on it by consulting extra biblical sources that may give us a little bit of background, may tell us a little bit more about, something that was true, in this case, about medicine at the time. And so there's actually quite a bit of information about that. We know what some of the supposed cures were for her condition. You want to hear some of them? They're kind of interesting. This one is to drink wine mixed with gum, alum, and crocus. Now that just doesn't sound good at all. Going to move on from that one. The next one was to drink wine, a lot of wine drinking involved. The next one was to drink wine in which onions had been boiled, while someone said, "Arise from thy flux." That's so Jedi mind trick, you know? This is not the flux you are looking for. Or, "Oh, from thy flux arise." So, so odd. But my favorite one is this one. You would hold wine in your right hand at a fork in the road. Why at a fork in the road? I have no idea. Hold wine in your right hand at a fork in the road while someone snuck up from behind and shouted, "Arise from thy flux." Ooh, it would scare you half to death. The wine would go flying. I mean, she didn't have the hiccups, for heaven's sake. No wonder she grew worse. Spent all her money paying people for cures like that. Wow. Well, notice in verse 27, it says that she touched his garment. Luke is more specific. Luke tells us that she touched the border, that is the hem of his garment along the bottom. So what we need to know about that is that, you know, Jewish men had a blue hem around the bottom of their robe. And from that hem hung tassels. And so the blue hem and tassels were intended to remind people about the law of God. Like this covenant that God had made with his people and the commands that he had given them. That's what that was intended to represent. But you know, for the religious leaders in particular of Jesus' day, who we know from reading the Gospels had become extremely performative. And they had taken to making their tassels longer and longer and longer. So they had these tassels to show off how spiritual they were, sort of a virtue signaling thing, you know, how long your tassels were. They all had tassel envy. Like there's this whole thing going on between these religious leaders. And so, you know, she decides that she's going to reach for one of the tassels at the bottom of Jesus' robe. Her idea was almost certainly that she would wrap her hand around a single tassel and just let the tassel run through her hand. And that would be that brief contact that she was going to need. Why did she do it on the DL? You know, why was she so sneaky? Why was she trying to like do it undercover? Well, to avoid rejection and shame. It was strictly forbidden for her to touch another person. And the angry crowd almost certainly would have given her a public rebuke. She was trying to avoid that at any cost, understandably, right? So let's pick it up in verse 30. It says, Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." Now, I just want you to picture this crowd. I mean, clearly from the disciples' response, it was bad. Like there was a need for crowd control. And we can imagine that as Jesus was walking, you know, he might have walked into the person in front of him, or someone behind him might have walked into him. There's people jostling him from the right, jostling him from the left. That's the kind of situation he's in. And in the middle of that, he stops and says, "Who hassled my tassel?" I mean, how could you even hope to figure that out? The disciples are like, is he serious? But notice in verse 32 that he looked around to spot her and that she came and she told all in verse 33. Why? Why did Jesus do that? Why did he do that to her? Have you ever been in a social situation where, you know, the conversation is going, you're in a group and the conversation is going a particular direction, and suddenly you realize that someone in the group is about to say something about someone else in the group that is going to humiliate them. And you're just like, don't say it. Don't say it. They're gonna say it. No. And then they say it, and it's just so cringeworthy. Like your heart is breaking for that person. Like, why? Why did they do that? This situation might seem kind of like that. I mean, especially when you consider the medical aspect of this. I mean, at pharmacies, they've got a line. They want you to wait behind the line so that the person talking to the pharmacist has a little bit of privacy. It's none of our business what they're getting at the pharmacy. Or even at a doctor's office, if you've ever been in the front of a doctor's office when someone rushed out to relay some little bit of information to you that maybe they forgot to relate to you. And it's very personal and related to the visit that you just had, and you're like, shh. But Jesus outed her. I think there's several reasons maybe that we could talk about. For one thing, I think he did this for her benefit. Notice in verse 34, he calls her daughter. She's the only individual in the entire New Testament that Jesus called daughter, singular. You can find a place where Jesus was talking to a group of women and referred to them as daughters, plural, but this is the one and only place where he spoke in this way to an individual woman and called her daughter. That's pretty special. I think, in part, Jesus was publicly restoring her identity and her dignity. But I think, too, that Jesus, and it's the same for us, it's the same for you and it's the same for me. Jesus didn't want her to experience his power without also experiencing his person. He wanted to meet her and to know her. He wanted for her to meet him and to know him, for them to have a relationship. But notice also the reference to faith in verse 34. Quote, your faith, end quote. He didn't want her to misunderstand. It was not his tassels that healed her. It was not her touch that healed her. It was her faith in him. He healed her. He is our healer. But a third way we could think about this, and that is that Jesus wanted everyone to know that she was clean. It's a little bit like a point we made last week about the pigs rushing off the cliff. If you weren't here, I invite you to go back and stream that and listen to that. But in a very similar way, they might have had a question in their mind. Is she ceremonially clean? Can I be physically close to her, or do I need to continue to keep my distance from her? Jesus wanted to make sure that those barriers were broken down. For so long, people had been avoiding her, keeping their distance from her, and talking about her. And, now, because Jesus made sure everyone knew, now she could go where she wanted to. She could touch what she wanted to. She could be near whomever she wanted to. Jesus was opening doors for her, just as he does for us. But backing up, we've almost forgotten about poor Jairus. If the disciples in verse 31 were asking, is he serious? Jairus had to be asking, is he stopping? Time was of the essence for Jairus. There was no time for this. Whatever had happened to the woman had already happened. Why are we still here? Why don't we get going? Oh my goodness, this must have been frustrating, if not infuriating, for Jairus. And similarly, in our lives, when it happens to us, it's frustrating, if not infuriating for us, right? Because, we're the people who drive over the speed limit. We're the people who interrupt others or finish their sentences. We're the people who rush to be first in line, even when there's no apparent advantage to being at the front of the line. It's like a thing. It's like competitive or something. We're the ones that are always hurrying our roommates or our family. We know why Jairus was in a hurry, but why are we? Why are we in such a hurry? Well, I think Jesus did what he did not only for her benefit, but for his. Think about these two characters. We have the well-thought-of Jairus and the nameless woman. We have the well-to-do Jairus and we have the penniless woman. And this was all part of God's plan. Someone said Jesus picked a good time to call someone daughter. Jairus was there for his daughter. And it's significant that his daughter was 12 years old and that the woman's illness had lasted 12 years. The girl had been well for 12 years, but was dying. The woman had been ill for 12 years, but was going to live. I think about that theological think tank that is the Rolling Stones, who famously said, Time is on my side. Yes, it is. Well, at least it was for the Stones. I don't know if you heard the Rolling Stones are releasing new music in 2026. And they're teasing future shows, especially in Europe. Now, they're going to have to exhume Keith Richards if they're going to do any of that. Oh, my goodness. I'm not so sure time is on the Stones' side. But you know what I am sure about today? I'm sure that time is on the side of every follower of Jesus. That means you. Psalm 31, verse 15, my times are in your hand. And again, in the Message, same verse, but in the Message, hour by hour I place my days in your hand. That is some sweet time management. Now, impatience is a mark of immaturity. On a road trip, it's not the adults who are asking, are we there yet? Like, does your spouse ask you, are we there yet? No, your kids ask you, your grandkids ask you, are we there yet? And it drives you crazy. Like, have you ever said, if you ask me one more time? Like maybe most of us have been in that boat at one time or another. But don't you think maybe that's how we sound to God? My voice in God's ear. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Oh, man. It's been famously said that God's delay is not God's denial. Thomas Kelly, the late Quaker mystic, said people nowadays take time far more seriously than eternity. We forget that this life is a temporary assignment, that God is at work in time, preparing us for what awaits outside of time. We waste time, God never does. God is the master storyteller, and the master never wastes anything in the story of our lives. Like any good writer, every little detail is important to the story. James 1 verse 4 in the Message. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. Marked by waiting. Waiting teaches us that God is in control, that time is on our side. And one last thought, waiting teaches us that good things come to those who wait. Verse 35, while Jesus was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not be afraid, only believe. Well, just when it seems like things can't get worse, they get worse. He finds out it's too late. All is lost. She's gone. Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. I've been heart sick. Have you been heart sick? Are you heart sick now? I mean, you talk about heartsick, Jairus was devastated. I wonder how long it was before the anger came, before the finger pointing started. It was the crowd's fault. If it hadn't been for that crowd, it was the woman's fault. Jesus was on his way with me when she interrupted. It was Jesus' fault. How could he not know better? She would have still been there when everything was done. There was no need to stop. We should have done this first and then that. It all would have been honest emotion, but Jesus preempts all of it when he says, do not be afraid, only believe. If you're the kind of person that marks in your Bible, you ought to be marking right now. You ought to be underlining, do not be afraid, only believe. Circling it, highlighting it, drawing arrows in the margin to it. Because you and I, we're going to need that verse over and over and over again in our lives. Do not be afraid, only believe. Verse 37, he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said to them, why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him. So the people wept and wailed. Actually, these were professional mourners. In the first century, in a situation like this, you'd Google professional mourners and you'd book them and they'd come and you'd pay them and they would make a big deal out of the situation. And it sounds weird to us. It's so far outside of our experience, but I can't help but think that if a group of people from the first century could visit us in the 21st century, that they'd find some things weird too. They'd probably think, that is so weird that you do that. But that's how it was then. So I think they misunderstood what he said to some extent when he said that she wasn't dead but sleeping. You are not your body. Neither am I. I don't even think that it's most accurate to say that we are bodies with spirits. I think it's more accurate to say that we are spirits with bodies. My spirit is the real me. My spirit is embodied in this body, but my spirit is the real me. And James 2, verse 26 gives us sort of a technical theological definition for death. It says that the body without the spirit is dead. So in Bible terms, death is separation. In this case, it's the separation of the spirit from the body. So in that sense, she was dead. She was dead in the sense that her spirit was temporarily separated from her body. But in another sense, she wasn't dead because her spirit wasn't dead. She had not ceased to exist. Her spirit, though temporarily disembodied, was still very much alive. And Jesus knew that. And he knew that he was going to, raise her once again. You know that no one ever died in Jesus' presence? Of all the ministerial functions that Jesus ever performed, a funeral was not one of them. And she was not going to be the first. So picking it up where we left off in verse 40, but when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha cumi, which is translated, little girl, I say to you, arise. Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement, I bet. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it and said that something should be given her to eat. That is awesome. Jesus is just all about the food. He's like, my work is done here. Where's the food? Let's eat. Let's just have a, oh man. Well, I mean, when Jesus said, who touched me, that struck us as weird, but doesn't it also strike you as weird that he said, don't tell anybody? Like, how are you going to keep this a secret? When people see the dead girl walking around town, it's going to be like so Walking Dead, zombie apocalypse. Like, oh, that girl was dead. Like, what is happening here? And Matthew tells us that word did get around. But I think, again, part of it is that Jesus was not wanting people to overemphasize his miracles and miss his message. And also, Jesus was on kind of a timeline. His popularity couldn't peak too soon in the sense that he was not here to build a following. He was here to die a substitutionary death on the cross so that you and I could trust him to be our forgiver and our leader, and we could receive forgiveness and the free gift of eternal life. So it was all moving in that direction. But throughout this whole episode, we see Jesus developing Jairus' faith. Not faith in Jairus, but faith in Jesus. And so with us, faith to trust Jesus in all things, in small things and big things, in easy things and hard things, that good things come, to those who wait. Now, as we're wrapping up, I just want to acknowledge something. Maybe we could even call it the elephant in the room. And that is that when we say that good things come to those who wait, we do not mean that we always get what we were waiting for. What about those times when we've prayed and waited and waited and waited and we didn't get that thing? Yeah. What about those times? We probably need to talk a little bit about that, right? Because those are the times that are really, really devastating. And that's why, knowing that there are going to be those times, that's why we must allow God to develop faith in us during the waiting times. The waiting times are where our faith gets developed so that on those occasions where we don't get what we were waiting for, we're not just completely overwhelmed by disappointment. And so God won't make us wait. We can wait on the Lord or we can choose not to. But how important that we do wait and that we wait well, marked by waiting. God is in control. Time is on my side. Good things, not always exactly what we were waiting for, but good things come to those who wait. There's a verse in Isaiah 40, verse 31. It says, "Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." I love that verse, man. That is such a good verse. I'll bet many of you are familiar with that verse. But we said at the beginning that the waiting, the downtime, it doesn't make sense and it feels to us like there's no upside. But is there though? Is there maybe upside? I think we're learning this morning that there is. Downtime. The downtime is where our hurry goes to die. And it's where our trust grows. So if you're in a season that feels slow, silent, or stalled, don't rush it. You may be standing right in the upside of downtime. Father, thank you so much for this Bible story and for the way these events mirror our own experiences. Lord, so many of us can reflect on times when we've been through something exactly like this. And there are probably more than a few people here this morning or watching online who are experiencing this kind of waiting right now. And so, Father, I pray that you would teach us today about the upside of downtime. That you would remind us of these things that we've talked about. Teach us that you're in control. Teach us that time is on our side. Teach us that good things do come to those who wait. Help us to be patient. Help us to trust. And Father, help us to glorify you by waiting well. In the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
And now it's time to fill out a Connect card.
Yeah, just go to our website, solachurch.life, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage, letting us know that you watched today, but also you can request information there about our small groups. And there is actually a lot more information on the website about those. At the top, if you click where it says Gather, you'll find information about all of our groups. An in-person group on Tuesday on the west side, an online group on Wednesday, another in-person group on Thursday on the west side. So check it out, find the time, the date, the location that works best for you, and join us for Sola Micro Church.
And don't forget, go and follow Sola Church on social media.
Yep, at Sola Church LA on all your favorite platforms.
And we hope that everyone has a great week. And we will see you next time at Sola Church Online.
Bye, everybody.